Greetings, programs, and welcome to another episode of Thumb Wars Presents Blistered Reviews. I'm your host, Sean Cronenfeld, and today we'll be taking a look at what publisher Ubisoft hopes will be the launch of its next great franchise, Watch Dogs. Does this open-world stealth-action hybrid have what it takes to hang with the big dogs, or does it need to go back to obedience school for another round of training?
I was the best at what I did. A hacker. A thief. I got in, got out. No one got hurt. Until I discovered something I was never meant to see. That's when they came for me, but killed her. Now, I'm coming for them. Someone ordered a hit on me. Whatever's in those files will lead me to them.
You want revenge? This phone can turn the city into a weapon.
Your men are expendable, Mr. Iraq. My empire is not. Don't forget who runs this city.
Trillions of bots with information at your fingertips.
You want to tell me what's going on?
Corporate espionage. Crooked cops. Big explosions, honey.
I heard stories, man, that like nothing you've ever seen before.
Okay, we got a bunch of dead bodies, right? We got 40,000 people above us. We need a distraction.
I want a name in that server.
Suspect behind the wheel.
So you're the shit raining down on me. You're interfering with my plans.
You took something valuable from me. Where are they?
It's no great secret that one of the biggest contributions to Ubisoft's transformation into the industry's third biggest independent publisher and developer is the company's ability to create successful franchises. Assassin's Creed, Splinter Cell, and the Raving Rabbids titles are just three examples of how Ubisoft has excelled at using an initial game to build a strong foundation for a franchise that can then become capable of producing extensive profits via a myriad of channels. So it's no small thing when the company decides to put its full effort and weight behind launching what they hope will be their next great franchise. And it's also no wonder that the game meant to kick things off will have been the recipient of as much hype and promotion as any title in recent memory. It's just too bad that this time around the game in question, Watch Dogs, seems ill-suited to living up to all the lofty expectations surrounding it. The good, the city itself, hacking elements, plentiful content, visuals, audio. The bad, story, characters, bland combat, driving mechanics, online play. The ugly. The look on my face when I hit a streetlight with a motorcycle and knocked over the former without doing any damage to the latter. It could be argued that in order to truly judge the success or failure of Watch Dogs, one must look at the game via two separate yet ultimately related set of criteria. The first is how the game fares as a standalone title in its own right, and the second is how it functions as the kickoff to a new ongoing series of games. And make no mistake, unlike something along the lines of, say, Child of Light, Watch Dogs was explicitly designed from the word go as the starting point of what Ubisoft hopes will be a long-running and highly successful franchise with a potential for expansion into other mediums such as film, books, and beyond. Such is just a sign of the times we live in, I suppose, and to be fair, when a major publisher like Ubisoft puts $80+ million into developing a AAA title, to say nothing of all the money spent on advertising and PR, they're going to want results. Still, in my opinion, Watch Dogs is a perfect example of how simply throwing money at a concept is not enough to ensure it will be a truly great game. This is not to say that Watch Dogs is a bad title, far from it, but it has serious problems both as a standalone entity and as the start of a new IP. Perhaps the area where Watch Dogs suffers the most, in terms of both criteria, is its story and world building. And this starts with a central narrative that is just one gigantic smorgasbord of cliché piled on top of cliché. I honestly don't think there's a single original idea to be found in the game's story, and the same goes for the characters populating it as well. All the familiar faces are here, from the brooding loner protagonist vacillating between hero and anti-hero, to the mob boss with shocking ties to the city government, to the beloved sister whose only real purpose is to be turned into a hostage in order to move the plot forward, to the tattooed female hacker with a murky past and a snarky attitude, and so on and so forth. The only memorable character in the entirety of Watch Dogs is a jovial criminal named Jordy that the game's lead Aiden has hired to help in his quest to avenge the death of his niece. Because apparently heroes in games these days can only be motivated by the death of an important female in their life. And even then, Jordy's only real purpose in the game is to serve as an occasional comic relief. As I said, every element of Watch Dogs has not only been done before numerous times, but it's also been executed far better to boot. Indeed, the current CBS TV show Person of Interest explores all of the same ideas as Watch Dogs, only with far greater complexity, style, and emotional resonance. Now, I'm well aware that I have many times in the past championed the idea that originality in and of itself is not everything, and that execution is every bit as important. But that's the thing, not only does Watch Dogs feature completely unoriginal concepts, but the writing is so awful that it takes those concepts and turns them into one giant, inconsistent mess. The game's tone, for example, is all over the place. One moment trying to get players to take its overarching narrative seriously, and the next engaging in a near constant barrage of juvenile humor that would not be out of place in a Saints Row title. Only the difference is that the Saints Row games at least have the decency to not pretend they're any kind of great art, and when they go juvenile, they go all out without an ounce of shame or hesitation. Watch Dogs, by comparison, refuses to ever fully commit, and that means that its big, would-be emotional beats have a tendency to fall flat, even while its attempts at humor generally produce more eye-rolling than laughs. But easily the most damning failure of Watch Dogs in terms of writing is that the game fails to create a compelling or interesting world for players to look forward to returning to at some point in the future. The original Assassin's Creed was also an incredibly flawed game, but at least it laid out a compelling and original story with plenty of hooks that felt like they could sustain a franchise near indefinitely. I finished the first AC ready and even excited to see where things would go next with its story, and while subsequent games in the series have not always gone in the directions I personally would have preferred, the franchise nonetheless still retains the amazing potential suggested by the original. Watch Dogs, on the other hand, with its familiar tropes and well-worn ideas, lacks a similar hook, and by the time I finished it, I was left feeling decidedly ambivalent at the idea of seeing the further adventures of Aiden and company. This is what happens when a game fails to present anything original or unique for players to latch onto. And a similar problem afflicts Watch Dogs' gameplay as well, which, while overall more successful than its story elements, still ultimately does not manage to carve out much of a unique identity for itself. In essence, Watch Dogs' gameplay feels like a mix between a standard open-world Ubisoft game and the Grand Theft Auto series, with the latter heavily influencing the game's combat, while the former presents the players with the now standard formula of a digital playground, in this case the city of Chicago, that's waiting to be conquered and opened up for more play options. The game's big hook is of course the ability to hack everything from a person's personal information to city infrastructures, and to Watch Dogs' credit, this is indeed an effective addition to the overall game, which among other things prevents it from feeling completely like just another GTA clone. The best thing about hacking in Watch Dogs is how it opens up a number of different options and approaches for players to take when tackling missions. For example, the ability to jump from camera to camera and hack anything you see means it's entirely possible to complete any number of challenges with little to no combat. That being said, it's also generally not necessary to bother doing this outside of a few specific story missions where it's required, because the game's completely broken economy makes it easy to gather enough money within the first hour of playing to purchase the most expensive guns available in the game. Said guns, in turn, make simply mowing down anyone who gets in your way the easiest option 9 out of 10 times. Obviously, doing so remains completely optional, but it still points to how Watch Dogs' gameplay can at times come across like a badly stitched Frankenstein monster composed of pieces taken from half a dozen or more other games. I would not find it surprising to learn someday that, like AC before it, Watch Dogs was initially conceived as a direct spin-off of another series. Maybe it began life as an attempt to make an open-world Splinter Cell, for instance, considering how much the stealth portions of Watch Dogs gameplay seems to have taken cues from that other series. When Ubisoft Montreal developed and released the first Assassin's Creed game, it represented something bold and new from the company, and many of that title's more glaring flaws could be chalked up to a byproduct of producing something legitimately experimental and groundbreaking. For all the game's problems, the potential for the series as a whole, and all the many directions and avenues it could travel were undeniable and exciting. Ubisoft had come up with a concept that really did seem like it had near infinite potential in terms of new iterations, and even now, after 7 full games in the series, it feels like there's still so much territory yet to be covered. Watch Dogs, on the other hand, does not at this point represent new ground from the company, and as such, its many mistakes and failings are far less forgivable. Even worse, the game creates a setting and central concept that, by the time the credits roll, already feels played out and tired, and at this point I think Watch Dogs 2, or whatever it ends up being called, will need to make some bold moves indeed if it wants to avoid ending up feeling like even more of the same than its predecessor. Of course, I would be remiss if I failed to acknowledge the fact that with 4 million units already sold in its first week alone, there's no question Watch Dogs will end up being considered a success by Ubisoft. Nor do I begrudge anyone who's having fun with the game, but what I do feel compelled to question is whether or not 6 months from now they will remember Watch Dogs or look back on their time with the game with any real degree of fondness. And that's the problem. Judged solely as a standalone title, Watch Dogs is a perfectly decent open-world title, mostly held back by dreadful writing and some truly questionable driving mechanics. Its bland gunplay, seemingly simply cut and paste from the GTA series, is also problematic, but the game does at least have some unique gameplay elements to help distinguish itself from the multitude of open-world titles out there these days. Throw in a terrific and compelling, if fairly inaccurate at times, recreation of Chicago for players to explore and play around in, and you have a game that's good enough to be worth buying for anyone interested in a decent open-world adventure. The problem is that in this case, I'm unconvinced decent is what was needed in the long term. If you're looking for a fun open world game and are prepared to tolerate some major flaws, then Watch Dogs will certainly fit the bill. Just don't go into it expecting the next great open world revolution. Score, 7 out of 10. Good. Recommendation, try it out.